We are good to go.
All right, everyone, welcome to our Tech Talk this Friday. Thank you for joining us. We have Erick Castillo here joining us today, and they're going to talk about how to scale your um, career while also prioritizing mental health, which is very important. So, thank you for being here and take it away.
Thanks, Regina. I'll share my screen. 1 second. Perfect. Let me know if someone is not seeing my screen. First of all, thanks, Regina and the Tech Academy for having me here. Really excited about the opportunity to meet you all and have this conversation where usually us engineers tend to focus a lot on the technicalities of it. Of course, it's most of what we do, but also it's important to focus on the other area, how good we feel and how aligned we have our career compared to our lives. As Regina mentioned, my name is Erick Castillo, and today we're going to discuss how to scale your career while prioritizing mental health. How we're going to spend our time together is first, I want to know all of you a bit more. Then I will explain you a bit about me. Then we will move to understanding what your career should be about when you think you should scale it or grow it. From there, we're going to discuss the seniority profile, and I will show you a 7 skills graph on what the profile looks like based on my perspective. And then we are going to analyze the top 3 mistakes in one of those skills. I love to cover the 7 of them, but we don't have enough time for them. So I'm going to focus on those top 3 that have an impact in your mental health. And at the end of the presentation, I want to put it all together so all of you have something that you can take home and actually start working on right now. So first, I want to hear a bit more from you. First, I want you to share in the chat a number 1 if you're a student and you are not currently working as a programmer or any tech-related job. A number 2 if you're a student and you are also working. A 3 if you already graduated and are searching for a job. And a 4 if you already graduated and you currently have a job as a programmer. Also, please share if you're a career changer or if this is your first career. I'll be happy to learn more about your experience in that area. Or if I miss a category, feel free to share it in the chat. Cool. For those watching the recording, I'm seeing a couple of 1s, 1 4, a couple of 4s now. Cool. I love the variety. First of all, I love to stop making assumptions about the audience and get to know a bit more where you are. I think this presentation is valuable. It doesn't matter in which level you are, but still it's the best to know who is in here. Now to talk a bit about me, I'm located in Costa Rica. I was born, raised, and currently living here. I have lived here most of my life, except for 6 months that I went to Austria. And this is a bit of a beautiful country that we have. Another thing about me is that I'm weird enough and I have 5 rabbits. These are kind of my kids, and the girl at the spot tend to have a lot of fun playing to dress them up every time I take them there. But let's talk about my career. I come from a conventional background. I started studying at a university here in Costa Rica, computer science in 2011. Halfway through my career, I decided that I want a bit more of a street experience, and I started an apprenticeship program in the company called Pernix. It's a Costa Rican company. It was supposed to last 2 or 3 months, but I ended up staying in that company for almost 5 years. I worked with different US clients. The biggest one was Spectrum, which I worked on the payment system. However, I also had the experience to work with multiple startups that kind of helped me to define the path that I wanted for my career. After 5 years, I decided to make a change, and I jumped to Dino IT, another Costa Rican company. I made this change for 2 reasons. The first one, it was my first recognized senior role. And the second one, I wanted to get out of my comfort zone. I was kind of one of the veterans in Pernix, and I wanted the challenge to see how will I develop when conditions change. After spending less than a year in there, I realized I was not growing in what I truly wanted. And at that time, it was becoming an architect, but I was not working directly with an architect from which I could have learned a bit more. So I jumped to Smash, another Costa Rican company where my client was Silac, an insurance company in the US. I was working a bit directly with an architect, however, it was still not what I was searching for my career. And in less than a year, I decided to make another change. The opportunity to go to Mentor Collective appeared. It was not exactly what I searched in terms of the technical needs, no architects in there. However, for the last 5 years of my career, I was searching to use my skills to solve social problems. And this is a social enterprise, so that actually caught my attention. And in terms of fulfillment, it has filled all my needs. So I've been there for the last 2 years and planning to stay in there for a while. But I wanted to share my career to give you a couple of insights. The first one, well, I haven't touched on this, but my main focus has been being a full stack. However, I also have glimpses of DevOps, mobile, and project management, this mainly to fill the business need gaps at the moment. But that helped me to get some experience on different areas and then realize what I actually enjoy. The biggest challenge was that after my apprenticeship program, it has been hard to find proper guidance. It's hard to find an architect that have the time availability and the desire to spend some time to guide you, especially if you don't have one in the company. There are resources out there, some of them paid, some of them free. It's good to search. However, it's still not as easy as I thought, and it was not as easy 10 years ago. The main takeaway that I want you to take from my career is that it has not been a clean paved road. And I mainly touched this because I've been approached by engineers that are starting in their first 1 to 5 years and tell me, oh, I want to be as good as you are solving problems. Every time I ask you something, you can solve it in 5 minutes. Well, there are two things related to that. The first one is if it wasn't for Google, I wouldn't be able to help them the way I do. But also they are just seeing the final years or these more recent years, but they haven't seen all the mistakes that I made in the past. I've been exactly in the places that they were. And that helped me to realize how to actually connect with them and help them not only on the technical issues, but to focus on how they should use each of the mistakes as a learning opportunity. But what has driven me the most and something that I enjoy a lot about this career is this phrase from Jim Rohn. I am a fan of Jim Rohn. If you have the time, I advise you to go to YouTube and watch his seminars, really cool. But basically he said, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. Don't wish for less problems, wish for more skills. Don't wish for less challenge, wish for more wisdom. And I think this applies really well in the career. I'm pretty sure that all of you have faced some problem, rather by learning recursion or seeing how to apply Fibonacci and solve it. Whatever problem it is where you wish it was easier, you had some challenges trying to understand it, but it was not becoming easier. The only way to actually move forward is becoming better. And that's what becoming a senior is about, is realizing in what areas you want to become better so you can solve better problems. And by scaling my career, I had 3 realizations. The first one is something that is not as obvious, but I like to give some focus. And there's nothing wrong with being an employee. I think there is a lot of backlash in social media, especially when you open it and you see the new 20 years old millionaire, or maybe you see your friend that is an entrepreneur traveling in Europe one day that you're totally stressed and people are saying that you should not be a 9-to-5 employee. Whatever it is, there's nothing wrong with this. And that's something that I want you to have in your mind if this is the path that you decide. Because the second realization that I had is that your career and being an employee, if that's what you choose, is a means to build the life you desire. Especially with software engineer or tech-related jobs, that they touch many industries, so you can choose from a variety of options. So the 3 reasons that I have found out to scale your career, well, the first one is money, which is common, but also there tends to be a taboo on talking about money. If you ask someone their salary, usually there's this bad connotation that that's a topic that should not be discussed. I think this is something that needs to be removed, in a sense that you should be able to talk about money first, because you're going to have a lot of money conversations during your career. This will allow you to actually ask for the money that you want or need in terms of raises or in terms of promotions. but also because money is a tool to build your life. This can buy freedom of space, freedom of time, peace of mind, uh, access to health services, whatever it is this tool to allow you to reach your goals. The second one is when you scale your career, it will open new doors. And I think of doors as in experiences. For example, you can focus in becoming a cybersecurity expert that will allow you to have certain contracts overseas if that's the experience that you want. Go and live overseas and have an experience in a foreign country. And the last one is answers. For those that are wondering why I have a 42, that's because that's the answer to life, the universe, and everything. For those that don't get the reference, is from the Hitchhiker Guide to the Universe. Good book in case you want to read it. But scaling your career is about finding those answers and meaning in your life. A meaningful life is built from using your skills to solve problems that will help people. And as you start gaining more experience, you could help to solve bigger problems, and you can focus in any industry you may want. For example, you can be in edtech, fintech, medtech, depending on your preference. You can use your experience to help nonprofits to grow if one of them actually caught your attention. Or something that I heard is really common is coming part to the entertainment industry. I heard a lot of engineers saying that they started in this path because they want to be game developers. Coming back to the third realization is that growth is not linear. And this is true for any type of growth. It can be personal, it can be in fitness, whatever it is. You tend to think that you are making enough progress and you're not coming back. And then at some point, another triggering event will trigger the same reaction patterns that you had. And I always love to give the example that when I was growing up, I learned a bit of rage from my mother and my mother's family, and that started popping up during my late teenage years. However, I went through a process of, I will say, fixing that. But even though in my late 20s, there were new triggering events that triggered that reaction pattern again. And I felt that I was like not making progress, I was not good enough, I was going to be tied up to that all the time. However, every new occurrence, I realized that they were first less often, and also I had better tools to analyze and get myself out of those situations faster. And I think your career will be exactly the same. First, in terms of like, it tends to be repeated in, you have like one more CRUD to create, a new login form, or you're starting a new distributed application system, whatever it is, you tend to solve the same problems over and over. But also, you're going to make mistakes. And from time to time, when you make a mistake in a different area that you never faced before, it could feel the same reaction pattern that you felt during the initial mistakes in your career. That does not mean you are not making progress, because now you have better tools to get you out of that situation. But I know it has not been as exciting and enlightening the path that I painted for you so far. I've been talking about how hard it is, all the challenges that will come. And that's because it's true. It's going to be challenging, but I think that's also what helps to create a career full of meaning and something that you will appreciate. There's a bright future ahead of you, and this bright future will be built from the process of visualization. So you can visualize what you want to be, exactly where you want to be, why you want to be in there, and start making the smallest steps to get to that area. It's this process of becoming better and facing even more problems that will make it enjoyable, and it will also be a boost of self-confidence. And the reason I love to talk about seniority is because when I was growing, as I mentioned, I had this challenge of finding appropriate guidance or appropriate mentors, but also mainly to this phrase from Jim Rohn. Once again, Jim Rohn, I mentioned I was a fan, sorry about that. But he said, if you want to be healthy, study health. If you want to be wealthy, study wealth. If you want to be happy, study happiness. And if you can study happiness, which is really abstract, you can study seniority so you can become a senior. And what I want you to have in here is a framework or an idea of what becoming a senior will look like, because all of you will be in this path. It doesn't matter in which specific branch, but it will be pretty standard on the skills that you will need to be a senior. So you can actually start this process of visualization. You can realize, oh, this is what being a senior is about, and this is how I want to approach that seniority level. We will come to the skill graph later, so you will have a better idea. But this is your opportunity to study seniority so you can become seniors. And after analyzing my career, analyzing my apprentice's career, and other people around me, I realized that growing and career growth as a whole might feel as this image you're seeing. You're currently in a valley, there's a lot of fog, you cannot see too much, and there's only like one mountain in the distance. Since that's the only option you have, you start climbing it. Once you get to the first plateau, you have this view. There's still some fog, you can see another 3 peaks. You choose the one of them that actually caught your attention the most and decide to climb it. You can see a bit better, but it's still a bit foggy. Once you get to the plateau of that peak that you choose, you realize you have a better view. Actually, this is a really enjoyable view. You can see further in the distance. You can see all the path that you have traveled. And then you come to realize that out there in the distance, there is a mountain that for some reason seems interesting and you want to go there. However, the only way to get there is by going back all the path that you already climbed. So you are a bit reluctant. You might be wondering if it is worth to do that because you are comfortable where you are, or maybe you should stay in here, but will you regret all your life staying in this plateau? And this is a really pessimistic scenario, but it's something that happens. And when I was telling you that I've been approached by engineers telling me that they started as engineers, but they want to be game developers, is because I've seen engineers with 7 years in web development tell me that, and that they are not courageous enough, or they don't feel like they are going to do the jump because they are already used to the salary they have. They're afraid of losing all the experience they have. It's not always that case. You won't lose all your experience because you will get some skills that are applicable for every industry, but it's still, you will have to take some step backs to start climbing another mountain. What I want you is to start with this view. It doesn't matter if you are like starting from zero or you already have like a couple of years of experience, is to have this view at this moment where you will have no fog at all. You can see all the mountains around you. You will have a map that will allow you to make the best decision on your career. And to achieve that, there are 2 tools that you will need. I will call it the map and the compass. The map will be clarity. And clarity is about knowing where to aim. Knowing where to aim is about that process of visualization of knowing what you want to achieve. And the main problem with our industry is the noise that we have. So clarity is about removing all that noise because you have many options. You can be a QA engineer, you can be a web developer, a mobile developer, work on embedded systems. And there are so many options out there, but not only that, there are options plus industry. So you can be a DevOps engineer in fintech, if that's the industry that calls your attention. With all those options, it's hard to choose, and analysis paralysis is really possible. However, clarity is more about appreciating time. Time is your most valuable resource, and what I want you is that you have this clear view so you don't have to take a step back in the future. It's not about adding pressure of having right the first time. I think no one is perfect and it's hard to have it right the first time, but it's about knowing what you want to achieve so you can make the adjustments when you need to. And the second one, the compass, will be sustainability. Sustainability is the fact of understanding what are you willing to give. I think most of us understand what are we willing to get, but it's harder to understand what are we willing to give. For example, at some point when I was a kid, I wanted to be a rock star, but I was not willing to give what it takes to become a rock star. Practicing the guitar all day until I get good enough, I was not willing to give that. Sustainability is about understanding your limits, and this will be as unique as your goals and desires are. Sustainability is the fact of managing the resources that you have. In the scenario of climbing the mountain, that could look like as managing the water you have, the food you have. In real life, this could be managing your energy levels, managing your willpower, your time, which all of those will need to be recharged at the end of the day when you go to sleep. You have limited resources, and it's what you do with them in this limited time that will get you the results that you want. But my main motivation after talking about clarity and sustainability is my approach to life. And this book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware, kind of summarizes it really good, where she was a nurse that worked in palliative care. And she summarized in this book the main reasons people give on why they have regret at the end of their days. The first one she covered is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Second one, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Next one, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Fourth one, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And the last one, I wish that I had let myself be happier. Following our topic today, the first two feel more aligned to what we're discussing, but at the end of the day, I want you to avoid regret from the life that you are trying to build. And your career will be one of the tools that will help you to get that life and avoiding regret at the end of it, especially in point number two, where people wish they hadn't worked so hard. So it's about finding the balance on how much you want to develop yourself. But after all this introduction, we need to understand first what's that peak that we want to point to. What are the skills of a senior engineer? And as I mentioned to you before, I divided this profile in 7 skills. But before I present that, I want to see a couple of guesses in the chat of what do you think those skills are. Okay, anyone who is willing to give it a try to any guess? Mentorship, that's a good one, David. Okay, I'll move and show you what the 7 skills I think they are. I created this list from research and also by analyzing coworkers, my own profile, and people that I admire in the industry that I've never met. The first skill is leadership, and I think part of leadership will cover what David mentioned, mentorship. The second skill is your ability to make questions, and questions actually drive a lot of what we do. Third one will be communication. From there, confidence is one of the most important skills, and that's not usually considered too much in the career, but this is the one that we're going to cover today. And the other 3 are technical leverage, decision making, and problem solving. It can be a bit surprising that technical leverage or technical knowledge is just one of the 7 skills, considering that our career is so focused on our technical knowledge. But this mainly comes from a book from Dale Carnegie called How to Win Friends and Influence People. In this book, he says that about 15% of one's financial success is due to one's technical knowledge, and about 85% is due to a skill in human engineering. So the other 6 skills outside the technical leverage are those human engineering skills that are important when you scale your career. And I'm not saying that if you only focus on developing your technical knowledge, you won't become a senior. That's totally possible. However, we are focusing on a sustainable career, and all the others are as important to work on, so you actually enjoy what you do and prevent frustration, prevent the idea of having certain resentment with coworkers, with past employers or current employers, just because you are not developing the skills to work in a social industry, because at the end of the day, we all have to work with people. Something that I want you to note in this profile is that this is not tied to time. And I know it is real common in the industry to see, we're requesting for a mid engineer or a senior engineer that needs to have from 5 to 7 years of experience, or 9 to 10. Well, first, there's not a standard out there. Companies don't get aligned in what it should look like. That's just an average, considering on in which time frame you get the experiences you need to apply for that job. So if at some point you see that you meet the requirements for a job description, but not the time, don't be afraid to participate, because you can get the experience in less time or more time, depending on how you define sustainability and the clarity that you had on what you want to achieve. I think one phrase that is really real in this industry, because it updates so quickly, is that if you do the same thing for 25 years, you don't have 25 years of experience. You have 1 year of experience repeated 25 times. And since this industry moves so fast, every single day there are new JavaScript frameworks, new things to learn. You have to constant adapt to it and continue to learn, because that's what's going to develop your skills. So by repeating the same thing, at least in this career path, you won't get too much of experience. So that's what I want you to have in mind in terms of time. There's no one time frame that will define if you are a senior or not. It will be first why you want to become a senior, where, and how you work and balance out those skills. As you can see, these skills are not reserved for seniors only. Actually, like your levels on different of them will determine where you are in your career, if you're a junior, if you're a mid, and even for seniors, it is going to be different from person to person. This will be based on your experiences, on your goals, on your desires. But okay, let me step back before I move to that one. As I was mentioning, we don't have the time to cover the 7 of them. However, since we are focusing on mental health and defining what sustainability will be for you, I'm going to start and cover only the skill that I think has more impact in your career. And for me, that is confidence. So from now on, I want you to assume that we are making a big zoom only to this confidence area, and that's where we're going to cover. I want you to understand what scaling confidence is and why it is important in terms of mental health, not from what you need to do, but to watch out from the most common mistakes that I've seen. And the first mistake on developing confidence is trusting your memory. Believe me, brains are unreliable. And if you think otherwise, that's your brain trying to fool you. That's why there are big list of biases and how to prevent them, how to try not to be fooled by them. And this mainly happens because our brain is focused on survival. It was developed by evolution. So it was easier, or not easier, but more important to pay attention to some leaf moving right behind you rather to the beautiful flowers that you have in front of you. Because if you watch the flower, it will be nice, it will be enjoyable. But if those leaves moving right behind you were a tiger ready to jump to you, then you will die and you won't be able to enjoy those flowers anymore. So our brain tends to focus even more on the bad things that happens, and our memory supports that. From a book called Stumbling on Happiness from Daniel Gilbert, he's a psychologist that makes this confirmation that our memory is really bad at remembering, especially because it tends to think that what happened in the past was worse than it actually was. And this also biases how we predict the future, because we're really bad at predicting. We tend to believe something will make us more happy than it actually makes us when we achieve that goal. I think, at least for me, it has happened that at some point I thought, oh, when this happens, I'm going to feel so happy. It happens, and then the satisfaction is really low. That's because our brain is not reliable, and trusting our brain will be bad for our career. But to analyze how trusting your memory will look in your career, first, it will be that your eyes are going to be in the mistakes. As I was mentioning, it's easier to focus on the bad things because those are the things that will allow us to survive. Things have changed and we don't have to worry about tigers. At least most of us won't have to worry about tigers. But at least in our career, we tend to have the same approach. Probably we had 10 wins, we were able to finish 10 cards alone and provide the feature that was needed with quality and excellence. But then there's one single ticket that we get stuck and we need help from someone else. And we start focusing only on this ticket and we start downgrading our level or how we feel about ourselves. Our confidence level actually gets a hit because we only focus on the bad thing that just happened. Another way on how this mistake could affect your career is when you ask help on the same issue twice. And I've seen messages in Slack saying, Eric, I know you already helped me with this, but anything after that but is just an excuse. And that's some data that will allow you to find out that you are repeating a mistake and it's on you why you didn't learn from it the first time. I'm always open to help people, even if they ask the same question once again, but I also allow them to see that they're asking the same thing and there's something that they can do to actually learn from their past mistakes. And for me, the biggest one is when you trust your memory, this is the root of imposter syndrome. I won't cover imposter syndrome today. There are really good resources out there, cool videos. I also recommend the Imposter Cure book in case you feel this is affecting you. But personally, I believe that when you trust your memory is when imposter syndrome actually kicks in because you are not fighting your feelings or your thoughts with data. The second mistake is the fear to ask. We all know the phrase, ask and you shall receive. And it sounds really easy. However, the main problem with this phrase is first, people don't ask, including myself. I include myself. I tend not to ask from time to time. But even when you want to ask, the main problem is that you don't know what to ask for. And if you don't ask or you don't know what to ask for based on your needs and your desires, you won't receive. If you don't receive, this will lead to frustration. And what type of frustration I'm referring here? Mainly the frustration that you have at the end of your working day that actually ends up in you complaining with your partner or your friends or your family about your current position, your career, how you are not growing where you are, how you feel stuck. Most of the time is because we don't ask. The problem that I faced when I was not asking is that I was at the mercy of others. Others called managers, bosses, companies, because if I was not asking what I truly wanted to become, I was just becoming what the company needed at that time, what the manager told me to do, because based on his perspective, that was the best for me. And he was giving this advice from a sense of caring. He was caring about me, but it was still his experience. And the way I perceive life is way different from all my managers. So I was the only one that could ask what my career should be about. Once you start giving away this power to ask, you will realize that in life we only have a limited amount of things that we can control. And if we give that power and we don't have control on those things, then we're going to have a hit on our confidence because we are not the owners of our life. However, this mistake in your career will look like not being able to ask the amounts you want in raises and promotions. I covered part of this at the beginning of the presentation. Removing the taboo of money is important, but also is knowing why to ask for a certain amount. It's because your needs. And if you're asking for a certain amount, how you approach that conversation to show the value that you're providing that will actually support this request you're having. But outside from money, also in your career, if you don't know how to ask, you are going to lose professional development opportunities. This could be in budget mainly because companies tend to have a certain budget, rather yearly or every 6 months, that you can invest on. Most of the time, people just buy books or courses. Not that there's nothing wrong with that, but if you have clarity on what you want and you know how to ask and what to ask for and why to ask for that, you can make the best use for this budget and actually get the benefit of a company that is willing to invest in you, because at the end of the day, that knowledge, you are going to take it wherever you go. And the second development professional development opportunity is by getting assigned cards or tickets based on your preference. If you have a preference for front end and at some point you're only getting assigned backend cards because you have not shared what's your preference, that's totally on you. It doesn't mean that all the time the company will be able to fulfill that. But if your project manager or product manager, boss, whatever it is, knows about it, it can help you to get more of that and also start getting the satisfaction that you are developing the skills that you want to develop in the industry. And that third thing that could affect not asking is actually lacking the opportunity to improve culture and resources. Asking is not only about knowing what's best for you, it's also by improving where you are. It happens a lot that there is an issue and everyone is facing it, but no one is willing to speak about it. And then you realize you say something related to that issue and people start popping up saying, oh, I think that's that same stuff. And that's when improvement starts to being made. So knowing what to ask is also about improving where you are. The last mistake that have an impact on confidence is the sabotaging storytelling. For me, this is one of the most impactful in terms of mental health because this is actually draining. And at the end of the day, it will have you frustrated, will have you sad, will have you feeling unenergized to work on your outside of work projects. This is because we become the narrative we tell ourselves. We are the words that we repeat in our mind every single day. And the phrases of self-sabotage usually look like, I can't, I don't know. And some examples could be, I don't have enough experience. That's one phrase that you will have in your mind where you're approaching a new problem. Or I don't know how to use this particular framework. I can solve these problems alone. I want you that while I move to the slides, if you think of any of these phrases that you say to yourself, feel free to share it in the chat and in the Q&A section of the presentation. We can review a couple of them and I can provide you some advice on how to change them. So the sabotaging storytelling in your career can look like this. First, you can make silly mistakes. And I call them silly not because there are mistakes that are actually silly, but I call them silly because they are easy to prevent. The first one is not being able to read. And I have one example when one engineer approached me. She was doing a deploy, and the deploy failed. She has done deployed in the past, and it was not her first time, but it was her first time facing an issue. She shared with me the error message and did a couple of attempts in Google searches, tried to fix that message based on what she found, but the deploy was still failing. So I requested for the full error message log, and then I realized that right below the line that she was sending to me in the first time, it was the real error message. So she was solving a warning and not the actual error. And it was literally the line below. I came to realize that this mistake was not because she was not knowledgeable enough to face deploys alone. It was because she was scared enough about this deploy failure that she was not reading fully. And that's what I call this a silly mistake because it's easy to prevent. The other one is not being able to search. That happened to me while I was still in my career, and one of my mentors actually had a rule that if he was able to find the solution to my problem in the first page of Google searches, then I wasn't able to ask him again for a couple of days. So that helped me to be extra careful, and believe me, even with that, I make this mistake when I was mainly telling myself, I'm not able to solve this alone. The last silly mistake could be finding the right solution. You already did all the first two things right. You were able to read, you were able to search, but then you find a solution and you're not able to make it work. Then another engineer comes, it helps you with 2 or 3 lines, and that's it. And there's something in the story that you're telling yourself that won't allow you to find those final details to get to the solution alone. This is not true all the time, but it's something to have in mind while you work. For me, the most draining part of this mistake, and the one that actually had a biggest impact in my mental health and how I felt with my career while I was growing, is what I call getting caught in the proving yourself valuable loop. And this is when you fight yourself so much internally because some part of you is telling that you are not enough and that you're not doing enough, you're not delivering enough, and probably the entire company is just watching you, waiting for you to fail. At the same time, you're putting the same amount of energy to prove that story wrong. So you're fighting internally between those two stories. This fight will actually have you at the end of the day out of energy. And if you had like goals that you want in your personal life, probably you are going to postpone them because you are so low on energy that you prefer to binge watch a full Netflix show or similar. But to start wrapping it up, I want you to understand how to put all of this together. What you're going to start is an act, and that's why we have these two sheep dancing. And this act is an act of counterbalance. Counterbalance is what will allow you to break this lie in your mind that life have to be balanced. That's not real, and when you try to actually live fully balanced, it will add extra stress to your life. Living on balance but trying to counterbalance your life is easier to understand when you analyze ballet dancers. When they are on their tiptoes, standing still, they give the illusion of balance. However, if you pay extra attention to their feet, they're actually making small adjustments every single time. So they give that illusion, but they are not still. They're actually wobbling from one side to another, but making adjustment enough to stay on that side. Scaling your career will be about that. Understanding when and how far you will have to wobble from one side to the other. Consider one side being your work life and the other side being your personal life. And even that personal life area could be divided into multiple of them. If you are a fan of music, maybe music will be one of those areas, fitness could be another one, whatever you want. And to start putting all of this together and analyzing how you can scale your career, there's something that we don't do, not only as engineers, but happens in a lot of careers, and it is analyzing what we desire in our lives. So to have a clear guidance, I have this tool or document that I'm happy to share with Regina or anyone that is wanting to have the full version of it can reach out via LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to share it. But also you can take screenshots while I'm covering this slide, so you have this available. The idea is to start with your own definition of personal success. If you don't have this, it will be harder to know where to scale your career. And to start with this definition, you will have to define your top 2 or 3 core values. If you don't know where to start with core values, I recommend Brené Brown's resource on core values. You can Google for that, and that will give you an insight of what core values could look like. From there, you're going to define your daily activities that align with those values and your daily activities that go against that. This will help you to have an understanding of where you are. And after that, you're going to create a detailed description of who you are, but not who you are right now. This who you are is based on your definition of personal success. And that could be you in 5 years, in 10 years, whatever time frame you can think of. It should be detailed in a sense that you can write what you wear, where you live, where you travel, what you eat, as detailed as you want, based on your definition of personal success. Once you have this tool, you're going to do the same, but for professional success. And the only difference in here is that now that you have number 1, I want to analyze why, if your core values differ, why is that reason for that? So you can actually compare the two lists and understand if there's a difference between your personal success and professional success in terms of core values. From there, you will do the same. Analyze the daily activities that align and those that go against that, and create a detailed description of what success looks like in your career. This is how much money you earn, how many hours you work, what technologies you use, in which industries you work, as descriptive as you want. To wrap up this plan, first, we're going to analyze if there are conflicts between the list. For example, if your personal success is about only working 2 hours per week and living in a beach, but at the same time you want to be a CTO in a FANG, or I think that should be MANG now, company, probably there's a conflict in there that you should need to analyze. And once you understand these conflicts, it's a matter of defining which one you want to prioritize, your personal goals or your professional goals. Once you are aligned on that, you're going to define the areas where do you need to improve the most to achieve that success. After that, you're going to define what are you currently doing or creating a plan on how to improve them. Probably this is the first time that you define what success looks like. You're going to have to create a plan based on imagination on what you're going to start doing to improve there. But also this could be your second or third iteration. So there are probably some things that you are already doing. The last two areas of your plan will be the signs that will help you to guide your path. Basically, start with the signs that will allow you to know that you're on your path to success, and also identify the signs that will tell you that you are going in the wrong path and you will have to adjust. I know that compared to programming, sitting down and creating this plan is not as exciting, but you have to think about your career and your life as your own personal company. And companies have to balance between being strategic and tactical. They can't be tactical all the time and just do, else they won't get to a place that they might not want to get. So this is about having 1 or 2 hours to sit down and do this with detail, be strategic, and then after that, you can go back to the tactical part. And as we discussed already, the mistakes that you will face in confidence, now I want you to have the solutions about when you go tactical, how you prevent those from happening to you. So coming back to the trusting your memory problem, well, it's easy. It might seem obvious, but once you have certain feelings or certain thoughts, the best way is to compare that with data, and the best way to have data is to write it down. So my advice is buy a notebook, buy a pen, and write. I have this personal preference of writing it down in pen and then transcribing that to a computer. But if you want, you can do it in your computer since the first time. This is going to be your ADR-like document. An ADR is type of documentation called architectural decision record, and it is used to track decisions that were made, but more than why decisions were made is the entire context that was around, because companies and humans forget about the context when a decision was made. That way, when you analyze in the future that decision, you can do it with more information of how it was in the past instead of just criticizing. For example, if you see a solution that is really messy and you start thinking, oh, wow, this code is garbage, why they do that? Probably there was a big reason behind, and maybe the company at some point had only 2 engineers and they had to do a quick hacking solution to see if that was worth it to invest on or not, and it stayed for a while. It will be the same with this data for your life. When you start judging yourself, you will have this data to understand the context when you made decisions, and also how far you have been growing since your first node. Something that I regret about my career is how many solutions I don't have handy or in my memory now, or how many problems that I solved I don't have because I wasn't writing since the beginning. And the pro tip with this is it will be really handy for interviews and your annual and quarterly reviews. Believe me, if you prepare 15 or 30 minutes before an interview by reading the best solutions you created and the problems you faced and how you solved them, it will show that you come prepared to the interview and you won't have to rely too much on your memory. But also when you are reviewing your performance with your manager, you'll have that information handy, and that will avoid that both you and your manager are biased by what happened recently, how you feel that day. Instead, you will have that data available, easily documented, and that will provide you some leverage when requesting for compensation increases, or maybe just thinking about how you're going to be promoted to the next level, what you have been doing that proves that you are in that level. You will have it truly handy, and believe me, this is a really good tip to have in there. The second problem that we discussed was the fear to ask. And the main solution is that you start practicing in your personal life, start from your needs, and this will improve your relationships. But also, it's easier to start with the small things and then scale it to the big things. It's not always easy to know what you want or what to ask. But for example, next time someone tells you what you want to eat, saying, I don't know, is not an answer. That's the best example of how you can start practicing right now. Because when you start talking about the most complex things, it's okay not to know what to ask. When you want to understand what your career should look like and the next steps you should take, well, you won't know what to ask because you don't have that clarity. But when you don't have that clarity, getting to know what you need to ask should be your priority. And for that, you have resources out there. This could be mainly your manager. Your manager will be there to guide you. That doesn't mean he will have all the responses, because there's always an opportunity that managers are also biased by their context, by the business need. However, if you have this doubt, they can help you get this guidance, maybe from other resources, maybe from different people outside or inside the company that you'll have available based on this hard conversation that you start having. And the only way to own your career is by owning your weekly check-ins. I know not all of us may have weekly check-ins with your manager. The only way to own them is first by having them. So if you're not having them, follow up with your manager. How can you start getting them, or even like define a cadence that will work for you? But the second part of it is that if you don't know how to get the most out of it, you can always ask. You can ask your manager. They may have different tools available, or you can even ask Google how to have good weekly check-ins with my manager. That will provide you some insight. To solve the last problem about sabotaging storytelling is that you have around 70,000, 90,000 thoughts per day, and 90% of those are the same. If you think consistency and repetition have an impact in how you have the results that you get, this is the best example. It's not easy to change the story you tell yourself, but the only way that you can actually change it is by first identifying what you want to change. And I always tied this solution to the first one we discussed, is that you should not rely on your memory. If you identify one thought that you want to change, write it down, because then you will have enough data to see, oh, every time I have this type of thought, I get this thought, and at the end of the day, I have this feeling. That will allow you to know which story you want to change. And that way you can start using self-fulfilling prophecies in your favor. I prefer to have the prophecy of thinking that I will be able to do something rather than I won't be able to do. And to wrap it up in here and open it for questions, I want you to approach your career as if you were a baby learning to walk. But not only the baby, you are also the baby parent. Because when a baby starts learning to walk and he stands up and start taking the first two steps and then fall down, their parents are not saying, oh, he won't be able to walk, he's the worst, he won't do it, we should stop him from doing it because he's going to fail. And the baby is not thinking that he is not capable of learning because he failed once. Instead, he stands up again, take a couple of other steps and fall again. But he continued doing that until he learns how to walk. Your career is going to be like that. For sure, you're going to make mistakes. I have made a ton, but making a mistake does not mean that you are a failure, and should not affect your confidence level. On the contrary, this is a learning opportunity you have to increase your confidence, to show that you are problem solvers. And as problem solvers, you can actually tackle any problem in the world that you may want with your career. That's what I have for today, and I will open it up for questions. Feel free to share via the chat or let me know if you prefer to unmute yourself.
All
Yeah,
right,
great
thank
presentation there.
you.
Oh, sorry, Regina, go ahead.
Go for it.
I was just going to say, great presentation, Eric. Really well spoken, and really well the way you showed how to align your goals with your career goals with your personal goals to kind of make your life the life that you want to make for yourself. So that was really good. We do have questions. I do have Jay that has his hand raised. So I'm going to open the mic for Jay, and then Regina, you can go ahead and read the questions in the chat, okay?
Perfect, let's do that.
All right, Jay, do you your mic is open, so go ahead and ask your question.
Make sure you unmute your mic.
All right.
Okay,
Well,
we can come back to you later. There were some questions. Sorry, were you
Cool.
going to say something, Rick?
No, go ahead.
So there were some questions about, you said some self-sabotage phrases that we use. So David has one, and he says, some self-sabotage phrases I use are I wanted to get more done, but, etc. Or this task took longer than expected, but any tips to rephrase these?
Cool, that's a really good question, David. The way I approach these phrases is by changing how I actually make them. Because if you say it that way, it's an affirmation. You are saying that's true. If you change that to be a question, it's conditional. For example, if I say I don't have enough experience, I can change that to say what I need to learn so I get the experience for this. Similar to your examples in here, where you say I want to get more done, but I think the but will be really important because that will help you to identify first what the excuse you're telling yourself. Probably that excuse is the real story. That I wanted to get more done is just like the symptom of the real problem. So analyzing what's after the but will help you to create that question that will guide you what you need to learn or change so you can get the results you want. Let me know if this answers your question or you will want me to cover a bit more.
Great. It looks like we have another raise hand question. I don't know if you want to take that, Rick.
Yeah, the mic is open, Sherry. Go ahead.
Maybe it was on accident. All right, so back to the phrases. Another one, Kay has one. So for me, my sabotage is always time related. I get stuck in this is going to take too long, and since I don't have time to finish it, I can't start it. I try to break things down into smaller pieces and do one part at a time in order to get around that. So maybe that was more of a statement. I don't know if that was a question.
No, but that's definitely good to cover. And that one is a bit trickier in a sense that you will have to know why you're doing what you're doing and why you're giving that excuse of can't start it because I won't be able to complete it. There could be multiple factors. The first one is that you don't have enough reasons to do that. Maybe you are just doing that due to external pressure, which is mainly what happens to me. Like, oh, this is something that I want to do. And it might be a lie. It's just something to show my friends that I was able to do so, but it's not something that actually calling me to do or act on it. So that could be one of the reasons why you're telling yourself this story. The other part of sabotaging yourself like this is because you want to achieve perfection, and you focus so much on getting it perfect that you prefer to avoid doing something small that will provide the learning, because it won't be perfect and it won't be finished. Depending on what this is, it might be better to just start doing small increments and realize, okay, this is big enough, I won't be able to finish it, but if I finish just this part, am I going to learn something? And actually, success is only achieved by a small consistency, but also a small imperfect actions, because small imperfect actions are the ones that give you feedback to know if that was done right, and if not, how you could learn from it. I know it is harder to provide like a full answer to this, because sometimes some things are actually time bounded. But if you are thinking this in terms of scaling your career, sometimes it's better that just go and create a really small part of a project, maybe the first endpoint, and it won't be perfect. It won't achieve the entire project that you wanted, but it will be an initial point. And that's how most products are built. They start with MVPs, which is the minimum viable product, and from there they iterate based on the learnings. Something that I use when I have to exercise and I don't want to is I pull myself into thinking that I will just do it for 5 minutes, and I start exercising. And after 5 minutes, I realize I would like to continue. So you can give it a try this way. Try something just for 5 minutes, and then see if you want to continue.
Great, thank you for that. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but please let me know if you do have any. But if you can't come up with any questions right now, Eric, would your LinkedIn be a good place for people to connect with you and ask questions after the talk?
Yeah, actually, let me
I can
get to
pull
the
it
tab.
up actually. I have it
Okay,
right here.
perfect. Yeah, I have in here my Instagram and my LinkedIn.
Oh,
You can search for
perfect.
both of them. I'm probably more prone to answering questions via LinkedIn. So if you want, feel free to connect. And if you have like other self-sabotaging phrases that you tell yourself that you think this night and you want a bit more insight on those, if you just want to share a bit of your career, or maybe like in a couple of years, you remember this weird guy from Costa Rica talking about these topics and you want to share something, feel free to reach out. I'm always open to answering there.
One last
Thank you.
question
That's
for
great.
you, Eric. What would you what's a good resource for learning salary negotiation? So somebody new to the industry, that kind of thing, what resources would you recommend?
For me, and probably this is a personal bias that I had, is that I didn't feel I was good enough selling. And what we do is about selling ourselves. We do it all the time. However, we are not conscious that this is something that we do. We do that. We are trying to become someone's boyfriend or girlfriend. We have to sell ourselves as who we are. Same when we are having an interview, we will have to sell ourselves and why we deserve the job and why the job should be for us is the second part of it. But in terms of negotiation, I approach it in a way that I start reading influence and persuasion books. The one that I mentioned from Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is a good place to start. It's divided in really small topics, so you can approach one topic per day, and that will help you to make small improvements. The other one is actually called Influence. I don't remember the author name, but for me, that was the best one in terms of considering how to sell myself. Because at the end of the day, in an interview, that's what you're doing.
Good stuff.
Cool. If there are no other questions, we can stop it here. But as I was mentioning, feel free to reach out via LinkedIn if something else pop up. Oh, actually, there's a raised hand now.
We can't hear you, Rick.
I unmuted the mic, but I muted mine. Go ahead with your question. Your mic's open.
Maybe another accident. Sure.
Go ahead and try it now.
Oh, there's a question in the chat.
There we go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there will be
it's
a
in the
link
chat.
to the recording.
Great. Can you
I
guys put
think
that in the chat?
Yeah, we can hear
Yes,
you.
I'm just about to put it in the chat. 1 second, let me copy the link. So as
Great,
mentioned, this is a recorded tech talk, so you can watch this and our previous tech talks later in our YouTube channel, and here's a link to that. Also, we have another tech talk next week. I believe it'll actually be the last tech talk of this year, and it's going to be on data and how to check into it and instrumentation of data. Not very familiar with the topic, but here's a link for that if in case you're interested to RSVP. Other than that, Eric, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all your tips. And thank you everyone else who joined in. Oh, looks like Sherry has one last question. What tool do you use to write down your ADRs?
Okay, so that will depend if ADR in the pure sense of what an ADR is in a company. Right now at Mentor Collective, we use the same place that we use for technical documentation to have a section for ADRs. If you are talking about ADRs in my personal life, I have 4 notebooks, and in those notebooks, I write different stuff. One of them I use it for books, on the learnings I have for books. One of them I use it for problems that I face in the career that I get to a solution on my own, or basically if I get assigned on a specific architectural decision that I need to make, and at the end of the day I see that the decision that I made had an impact that was positive and I can measure it, I tend to write my thought process. I write what was the result, what was the solution. I have another notebook for something similar, except that I'm not able to solve it on my own, and I call this my learning and mistakes notebook. And the other one is just for introspection. This is the one that I use to track my self-sabotaging thoughts. At the end of the day, I think like 15 or 30 minutes per month to transcribe those into different documents that I can search, but I do that in a Google Drive. The last journal is my retrospect or introspection notebook. I don't have a specific name for that.
Got it. Well, thank you so much. As I mentioned, thank you for joining us today. And then again, remember that we're recording this and I already shared the link in the chat. But I hope to see you guys next week. Like I said, it's the last Tech Talk of 2022. Weird to say that, but hope everyone has a happy Friday and a great weekend. And thank you again, Eric.
Thanks to you and the Tech Academy for having me here.
Yeah.
Of course.
Thanks, Eric. That was great. Thank you.
See you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.